Hey everyone, welcome to the Executive Edge podcast. I'm Jemai Canley, founder of Potential Unleashed Consulting. I sit down with founders, executives, and high performers to unpack what really gives leaders their executive edge. In a world where everyone has access to the same tools and information, what actually separates the exceptional from the average? Hey everyone, welcome into today's episode. Super excited. We are joined by Sara. Sara, welcome to the Executive Edge podcast.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you for being here. We were just talking a little bit before we started about, Sara being used to sunlight and me being here in Washington. It is one of those rarities. And so we're finding some commonalities and some differences as well. But, it's a beautiful day. And I know this is going to be a beautiful conversation. So again, I really thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah. Well, one of the questions I always like to start off with is, Sara, in your opinion, what should leaders be thinking about now?
That's a really great question. And I think for me, leaders should be thinking about their humans and the people that they are working alongside of, the people they're working for, the people that they're working to serve. And I, in conjunction with that, would really believe that in this current climate, in this current age, it's really difficult for all of us to balance our outside of work lives with our work lives, and for leaders to be able to hold that and live in that space with their humans is going to create the sort of culture and the sort of relationship dynamic that promotes effective work.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much for that. I find that so important and so refreshing. I would love to ask a couple of follow-ups to that because, and I don't know if you've seen this, so let me ask that first. I have seen a much larger focus on the human aspect since the pandemic. Is that?
I'm working in a school, and in a school setting, there's so much compliance and data that's
Yeah.
required that it does make it tough. But I would say overall, industry wide in the HR sector, yeah, folks are really prioritizing that balance.
Yeah. Yeah. I think again, for a lot of organizations, a lot of industries, a lot of leaders, I think the pandemic was a real wake-up call to looking at it through the balance. And I have found that a lot of, I'll say it this way, not necessarily younger people, but I think that there's an entire generation that is coming to these different opportunities kind of with the expectation and looking for organizations who balance those, who see them as more than just their position and their title, but like you said, recognize that people are balancing the outside work, the outside life with work life and all of those things as well. So, yeah, just you starting off with that is just really making me think about so many different things. I have 4 children. And our fourth child was born in July of 2020. So kind of height of the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
And it definitely, even prior to that, I tried to do a really good job of always balancing all of the aspects. But I can tell you that the pandemic really, really, really just, it shined a brand new light on it, right? Of how important that is and what that looks like. And here's the thing I think is so cool. Like you mentioned, that it can be done. And when we do it, it brings about such a great culture. So, question for you, if there's a leader out there who has been leading long before kind of this shift started to happen, so they hear about it, they know about it, but any tips that you would give them on how do you actually lean into the human side for themselves, and then also, as you mentioned, the humans that they are around? Any tips that you would give for someone who maybe isn't quite there yet? They're on their journey, and no need for judgment or shame or anything like that. We're all on our journey. So if someone is listening and you're on that journey, Sara, any tips that you might give to them on how to lean further into that?
Yeah, yeah. To go along with what you just said, the first tip is don't beat yourself up.
Mhm.
you we we are all somewhere on our growth journey, and we're taking steps every single day. I think that the next tip would be to um, move with intentionality, to consider all of the types of culture, and um, and really just to break it down into behaviors or actions
Mm.
or what have you. And I say that because sometimes folks that I've worked with, and even myself not too long ago, thought of culture as this ambiguous, unmeasurable, unattainable sort of thing. And it was like, this is too big and this is too weird. So I'm not going to touch it. And then as I started to learn about what goes into culture, this, oh, here's my little friend over
Love
here.
it. Love it.
um, but as I started to learn about what goes into, let's say, a cake batter of culture, it became easier to break it down. Okay, so we've got relationships here. Okay, so we've got transparency here. Okay, we've got accountability there. Um, and it's become easier to measure and easier to implement.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And that's a great segue into, I think, a conversation around culture. And I love what you just said about the how it can feel so ambiguous in the beginning, right? Culture. And so for years I would lead this workshop and it was called the art and science of culture.
Mm,
Because exactly what you kind of just mentioned, explain to people that there's kind of a science to it. There's a recipe, right? There are certain pieces of culture, but then there's also the art of that, which is okay. Now, even once we talk about relationships and we talk about transparency or communication, the art pieces, so we know that those, the science pieces, we know that those things are important elements in the equation for good culture. The art side of it is how Sara implements, those pieces is going to look different than maybe how I implement those as well.
mm.
So on culture, Sara, what tips would you have for someone who is looking to, I'm going to ask several questions around this, but one, let's start here. What tips would you have for someone who is looking to build a strong culture?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, I'd follow I'd follow the principles of social emotional learning. I used to teach this to students,
Yeah.
and so I apply this in my life as an employee, as a manager, as a leader. And the first thing is self reflection, introspection. Spend some time determining your values. What is it that you care about? What really grinds your gears when someone, rubs up against this value? And once you start to get a handle on your own priorities, then you can start to mix and match with your organization's values and priorities.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I love that. The introspection, starting first with yourself, right? I love that. Next question is, you've done your work.
Uh-huh.
You have made your determinations on what you value and what you would like your culture to be, but you have inherited a very different culture.
Mm.
How do you go about that? I work with so many leaders who are like, like they did the interview and everything else, and everything seems so great on paper. And then they got in there and they realized, wow, there's a very different culture than what they're used to or what they're trying to build. Any any suggestions, tips, or even experiences for yourself that you've had with like coming into a culture and inheriting a culture that doesn't quite match what your ideal picture is? What do you do?
Yeah. I mean, that is an excellent question. And I'm sure there isn't a soul on this earth that hasn't gotten a new job and then been like, whiplash, what is this? So in my experience as HR director or leader, it's a long process.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Funny enough, when I went to school, I majored in music education, and I was going to be a high school band teacher. Like that was my thing. And when we were getting ready to go out and do student teaching and prepare for the workforce, one of our favorite professors talked about when you get a new band director job, you're going to have 4 years of kids who don't know you, and your seniors are going to be the hardest because they've
Mm.
spent the last 3 years with someone they know and love. And then they're going to graduate, and you're going to get three 3 years of kids who maybe are a little challenging, and then 1 year of kids who love you, and then it switches to 2 and 2, and then 1 and 3, and then eventually it will be your own culture. And so I think about this a lot now that I am nowhere near band directing, and and how it takes time. You're really planting the seeds of a garden and nourishing those seeds. And so I when I consider how I've instituted or led cultural changes in various organizations, it always starts with community.
Mm,
Who are my allies here? And uh, who is going to keep me on track to make sure that I'm not just projecting my values onto the organization, but that things really are in alignment. And then once I've gathered, team and feedback and community, then that turns into, okay, what are like the low hanging fruit?
yeah,
what's
yeah,
what's the easy stuff? Is this person, um, or is this position or this level just not getting training? Oh, okay, great. We can fix that fairly quickly and easily. And then from there, I kind of do the next best thing, right? Like based on
yeah.
budget, resources, etc.
I love that, and Sarah, my mind is going in a very different places just based off of that response because,
Yeah.
I love what you just talked about around figuring out who those allies are and all of those pieces, right?
Mhm.
But you just said something, and I can't say that I've always connected it to culture, but one of the things I share is fear. And
Mm.
when I mean by that is when I talk about fear, I talk about how fear often, if not always, wants to make itself look bigger.
Mm.
It attaches itself to this other stuff that just makes it feel like it's too big. How do we get our arms around that? And you just mentioned like breaking it down. And I've talked about this with fear so often. I had a friend who, for years, would talk about how they were afraid to go back to college,
Mm.
afraid to go back, want to go back to college, want to change careers and everything else, but they were afraid to go back to college. And it was just this fear. And finally, one day we're talking, and I just said, What is it? He said, Well, college is just hard and everything else. I said, Yeah, but like, what? Be specific. And what they finally got down to was they were afraid of the writing elements. They had
Oh.
never seen themselves as a good writer. They had heard that college was going to be a lot more writing and everything else requirements. And I said, "Do you realize we can attack that, right?
Mm.
Like if that's the like, oh man, like there's so many different things that we can do to help support the writing aspect. There are writing labs. You can actually turn your papers in early and get feedback. There's all these different things, right? I was talking to them at this time about Grammarly, right? Like all these different things. And what you just said about culture, just you gave me a light bulb moment here of like, yeah, because if we look at culture, it can feel enormous.
Mm-hmm.
How do we possibly get our arms around this? But if you're able to break it down and say, oh, this is a training thing,
Mm-hmm.
we can address that. Oh, this is a communication thing, we can address that. So thank you for for that.
Thank you.
Like, oh, that's beautiful. I mean, because again, I think that culture, like you said, for a lot of people in the beginning, it just feels like, what is this thing? And it feels so abstract.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And then when you start even, diving into it a little bit deeper, then it just feels overwhelming and enormous, right? But
Mm.
if you can start to break down, and it might be multiple elements, but if you can start to break down the different elements and then attack those one by one, and I'm using the word attack, and maybe that isn't the best word, but approach those one by one, like, wow, I can just see so much for that. So sorry for that tangent.
No, don't apologize. I love the way you're drawing these connections.
Yeah, no, you just, again, like I said, you just helped me make a connection, a light bulb moment there for me myself. Another question I would ask about culture before we move on to some other topics would be, you know, if you were to give some advice to say, not that this is the solid, because we recognize that there's many different nuances and everything else, but just as just your opinion based off of your experience, what's one thing you would tell a leader to look out for, like meaning to try to avoid doing if they're trying to build culture? What's one thing that you would say, here's what I've seen that you should definitely stay away from if you're trying to build a good culture? Don't do this.
um, maybe I don't even know if this is a word. Opacity.
Mm,
So, so to be able to offer transparency, context, nuance, all of this when a decision is being made, um, and the more you're able to bring coworkers into the decision making process, the better.
yeah,
But even if it has to come from, you know, the upper powers that be or what have you, if you're able to go to folks and say, hey, here's the decision that was made. You know, it's in line with our mission and our vision and our goals. And so we're going to do this. I understand that it's going to lead to maybe more work or, you know, some uncomfortable moments for us as a team, but we're going to get through it. And here's how we're going to get through it. Like that is so much more helpful than, okay, this is what we're doing. Email me if you have any questions. Like,
I laugh because I'm sure we've all been there. We've all
yep.
received that message at some point in time.
Yes. Yes.
And you're so right. Like, why do we keep doing that when we've all been on the receiving end of that and not enjoyed it? And yet sometimes I think it's like parenting, right? You're like, I'll never do that. And then we become parents and we're like, gosh, I swore I would never say that myself. And it just came out of my mouth. And I think that that happens in leadership sometimes as well,
Yeah.
that we maybe didn't enjoy it, but we don't have another vision on how to do it differently. And so we just end up doing that thing. So yeah, thank you for that, Sarah. Thank you.
Yeah. And you mentioned parenting. You've got 4 kids. I've got 2 kids. And there are times when my 10-year-old is like, but why? And I'm like, can you just be cool? Can you just like there it's 1% of the time that I don't have a reason. Can you just
Yeah.
and
Yes.
she's like, no.
It's so true. It just happened today with our one of our kids. It said like it took everything in me to fight back saying, because I told you so. Right.
Uh-huh.
It was like, but I felt myself going there, like it was coming out of my mouth. And I was like, son, just do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Just trust me. But
Trust me on
everything
this
in
one.
me wanted to just go, because I told you so, right? That used to bother me so much. But again, I felt it coming out of my mouth, and I just was able to stop it at the last minute. Son,
Yep.
just do it. Just do it. Right? Just trust me. Just listen. Just do it. So
Yes. Yeah. And it's really funny. You know, as my 10-year-old, of course, I've been parenting for 10 years. And the more I've grown at work, as you know, going from an individual contributor to like a team manager to kind of upper leadership, the more awkward connections I've made between parenting and
yeah.
managing. Like the dynamic is, of course, totally different, right? Like my daughter
Yes.
can't just leave the house and be like, I quit, I'm going to go get a new job someplace else, whereas an employee can't. But the sort of care and reflection that I bring to my parenting is applied at work, and it's made me so much more effective.
Yeah. Yeah. So agree. On so many levels. I am such a deep believer in equity and being a leader who leads through an equitable lens. And I often tell people I learn a lot about what that looks like from my own children,
Mm-hmm.
because what works well with one doesn't necessarily work well with the other, right? And the intent is always really positive, but I must look at the impact. I must get to know them, figure out what, is going to inspire them, right? Differently. And I want the same, type of outcome. But again, how I say it, how I approach it, what I do, Sometimes they're going to be the same across the board, but other times they're going to be very, very unique to each individual. And I use that in my leadership style, even with our
Absolutely.
organizations. When people have asked a lot about like how we do our work, and I tell them, well, we don't do cookie cutter approaches because we find that even though organizations might share similar goals or similar situations, there's also this uniqueness that you must take into account, that what worked really well for that organization over there may not be the same exact approach that we need over here. We want the same outcomes, but we must figure out all the different things. Kind of you and I were talking about this earlier, like how we might approach certain things in an educational space might look a little bit different than how we approach it in a Fortune 100 company.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to look different than how you would approach that in a mom and pop, right? And that's going to look different than how you might approach it in a nonprofit, all working towards the same outcomes and goals or results of, performance, culture, and excellence and all those things. But yeah, so yeah, Sarah, I definitely resonate with that of like how much, and I never knew or thought this, but how much I would find these correlations between parenting and leadership as
Mm-hmm.
well. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah,
Makes me feel like I'm not alone.
definitely not. And I really love how things connect. I've been on my own unlearning, relearning journey, right? As a white woman in leadership, and especially now that I work with a very diverse group of humans, I I I have to do well, right? At the very least, do no harm.
Yeah,
And because of my privilege and my positional power within the organization, I have to keep learning. And so, one of the content creators that I really love is Desiree B. Stevens. I encourage folks to look her up.
yes,
And she talks a lot about the connections between different things. And so, if you're able to get a skill or a concept down at work, let's say, and then you apply it to your primary relationship, your significant other, and you're like, oh, great, I don't have to work that hard. Like there are these similarities,
yeah,
um, and it's really nice
yeah.
the way the constellation of our lives kind of ties.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well said. It is amazing. Well, one of the questions I've been wanting to pose to you as well, being your role in HR, and I think a lot of people will be interested in your advice around this. So, this question has come up in multiple conversations, and that is, what do you do when you have someone who is exhibiting some, how do I say, less than desired behaviors,
Okay.
yet they're not doing anything that warrants termination?
Mm-hmm.
How do you work with that person? Like, how do you coach that person? What would you say to a leader? Because I've talked to so many leaders who have at least one of those people on their team.
Mm.
They're not necessarily all the way in, they're not bought all the way into the culture. They're doing some things, but again, it's almost like they've studied right, the handbook, and they know what they can do,
Oh,
right? Well, it's like, well, that's not a termination thing. I know it's probably not desired, but it's not a termination thing. So yeah, any advice? I don't know if you've ever been there, dealt with that, or just again, even with from your HR hat, if other people have brought these types of things to you, or
yeah.
maybe they've come across your desk. Any advice that you would give to someone who is dealing with that type of situation?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Absolutely. Quite a few times. I have the pleasure of coaching our people leaders and our upper leaders about how do you deal with this person. And a lot of times the leader will come to me and it will have been months of simmering
Mm,
resentment. And they have finally come to me in my HR office and said, I just don't like this person. Can I put him on a performance improvement plan? And then I say, okay, let's take a breath. Let's bring this back into our own bodies so that we can be the best people we can be
Mm.
for our teams and our organization. Okay, so once we slow things down a little bit, and I offer some space for the emotion, because of course the frustration is real and it's understandable, and the viewing of impact to the team that maybe the manager, the leader sees that the individual person doesn't, that maybe they're not aware, right? Like, we don't know. Then we start focusing on intent and impact. And I asked the leader, like, what is the impact? Is it just them and you? Is it impacting other members of the team? Is it impacting our organizational goals, or whatever it is? From there, then we can get to work, because once we identify the impact, we know the problem we're solving for.
Yeah.
And then we can say, okay, well, what behaviors is this person exhibiting? We're not talking about personality. They might be the nicest, sunniest, most pleasant person on the planet, but the behavior is what's actually causing the impact.
Right.
And so we remove like the personality from the behavior. This is really tough for some folks to do.
Yes.
And so again, if you're in this situation, it's going to take some time, and you're going to want to find someone in your professional network who is able to help you sort through. But a former mentor gave me the framework of how questions. Okay, well, how are we going to address this behavior? How are you going to hold them accountable? How are we going to proceed if this metric isn't met, or whatever it might be? And then from there, I find it really important to talk with the employee, hopefully regularly, about career
Mm-hmm.
goals, just so that it's very natural when you go to this person and you say, hey, these are some behaviors I'm noticing. These are the impacts to the team, to the goals, etc. How are we going to make this work? And if you already have an idea of your employee or your coworkers' career goals, it's possible that like you get to have that conversation about, like, is this the right fit for you? Like, is this
Right.
what you want? Do you want to stay here? And sometimes it's convenient because they manage their own selves out. And sometimes they say, no, I'm fully invested. And you're like, great, I'm so happy to hear that. How are we going to solve these challenges? And then the individual is not being punished. They're part of the solution.
Yeah.
They have automatic buy-in because they're part of the
It's their
solution.
goals. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it becomes the manager's job to kind of function as coach, guide on the side, whatever kind of idiom you'd like to use, and then hold that individual accountable. Anybody can talk a good talk when they're in that meeting and they're like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Yes.
And and then 3 weeks later, everyone's busy again and they're back to their shenanigans, right? So there is a level of accountability and some not hand holding, but you got to be there to
Yeah.
say, I noticed that this is creeping back in. Do we need to revise our process? Um, and then, of course, I would be not an HR person if I didn't say, if it's not in writing, it didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have these wonderful, lovely co-creation meetings with your employees, at the end, you're going to say, hey, by the way, I'm going to follow this up with an email. Don't be surprised. I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Sara, I feel like that is a mic drop moment.
Mm,
Seriously, you laid that out so beautifully, so succinct, so clear, which I really appreciate. I heard several things. One of them from the very beginning was take a breath.
mm,
And I just think that is so essential. And we don't always do that as leaders. But I thought that that was so key. I love the how questions,
mm-hmm.
right? Because that's about not just dwelling in the current state of what's happening, but it gets us solution thinking, right? Like, how are we going to fix this? What's that going to look like? And then, like you mentioned, you know, knowing, which takes relationship, but knowing that this person's career goals and being able to really use that as the motivational tool, because then, like you said, there's less pushback because they're a part of the solution. You're working with them on that piece. So it's not, you better do this. It's, hey, I remember you told me that one of your goals was this. Let's talk about how this might be impacting that or what we can do to help further that along. This, yeah. And I just looked up at the time. So
Oh,
I know, right? This, again, amazing conversation, Sarah. I thank you so much. I have so much more that I could dive into, but I do want to go ahead and just close out with our closing question. And again, feel free to choose from either one of these. But one question would be, is there a book that you would recommend? And, or if you were giving yourself, your earlier self advice around leadership, anything that you would share?
yeah. Well, I'm going to be the overachiever and answer both questions. I mentioned Desiree Stevens earlier, and to my knowledge, she has some online materials that you can look at. But those 15 pillars of supremacy culture have been a
Yeah.
game changer for me. And if you're looking for like a real book, Permission to Feel by Mark Brackett
Mm,
talks about social emotional learning and its importance in the workplace. So that's great. And then advice for my younger self would be in conjunction with one of the pillars of supremacy culture. Don't try to go it alone. Don't try to go it alone.
yeah.
There's there are people out there who are willing to go to lunch once a week or have a meeting once a month or whatever it is, but you've got to have that community. Like you were saying earlier, it can be lonely in these
Yeah.
leadership positions. And so the more you're able to reach out and find that community, the better off you are.
Wow. Well, Sarah, thank you again so much. I cannot believe how fast 30 minutes went. But
See?
thank you so much for the conversation, for the time, for the wisdom, the experiences, the jewels, the tangible things that people can apply. Just thank you so much. Wonderful conversation with you today. I really appreciate it.
It was my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Everyone, please feel free to connect with Sarah on LinkedIn. And as was just mentioned, one of the goals of this podcast, as Sarah just mentioned, is to help build community. And that community can look a lot of different ways, but hopefully there are some things that you heard here that you're like, I'm not alone. And B, I can use and apply that. So thank you so much. We'll talk to you all soon.